Well, welcome back, Dr. Kebbe. How are you doing today?
I'm good. How are you?
I am doing very, very well. As we kind of discussed, we're gonna do a little chat about the most recent podcast that we put together, and in particular, your expertise with regards to nutrition sciences and your expertise around the microbiome. So maybe you can give us a bit of a teaser, if you will, as to why is everybody so excited about the microbiome when it comes to obesity?
Yeah, and the microbiome topic is really a buzzword these days. It actually dates all the way back to the 1670s, and it started off with a microscopist, and then there's a couple of really known scientists and physicians who spearheaded what we refer to as the microbiome. With the germ-free theory of disease with Pasteur, probiotics with Michnikov. And it's really now where we're continuing what began decades ago. So, the microbiome is such a vast topic. So there's a lot of points that can be discussed in relation to the microbiome. We have 200 grams of bacteria on us at any given time. It really fluctuates based on the organ you're looking at. So the skin is the most diverse organ. Then you have the oral cavity, the nasal cavity, of course, the GI tract. So they have such an important role to play in obesity and multiple other chronic diseases as well.
Interesting. So like 200 grams. I mean, it
A
almost
lot of
doesn't
bacteria.
seem like, well, it doesn't seem like much, but at the same time, when we're thinking about things that are microscopic, that's
Yeah,
kind of terrifying if we were to scrape it and put it in a pile.
I know. If you really think about it, you always have guests on you 24/7. So it's like having full-time staff and you pay them in soluble fibers.
Soluble fibers. I like
Yeah.
that.
They
That
love
is
they love that fiber. So
the cheapest staff that we have on the payroll right now, right?
if only all other staff was like that.
Exactly. So thinking about the microbiome, and we're excited about it with obesity, and we've talked a little bit about the fat mouse and the small mouse trial that they did, where they did the poop transplant thing.
Yeah.
So I'm sure some of our listeners have heard of those before, but what is this idea of a poop transplant? Like, are we actually going to take poop from quote unquote skinny people and give it to individuals that have obesity, or how does that actually look?
Okay. Well, the first disclaimer is, like I mentioned in the podcast, don't try this at home. But it really started with Jeffrey Gordon and his work in mice, the whole idea about the fecal transplantation in relation to obesity. So, what happened was that, first of all, they observed that mice who were lean versus mice who had obesity had different microbiomes. And they further noticed that when you take the microbiome of mice with obesity and you transplant it into germ-free mice, so mice who do not have any microbes, that they actually exhibit the obesity phenotype. And they gained a lot more weight compared to their counterparts. And then they did the same experiment with twins, human twins. They took the microbiome from these human twins and they transplanted them into these mice, and they saw similar findings. Now,
Okay.
what's really interesting is that when you put the lean mice with the mice who have obesity together, so in the same habitat, you notice that the mice actually don't gain as much weight. And that's mainly because, they eat whatever is there, so they eat each other's poop and everything, and they get some of those some of those microbes from the lean phenotype.
Okay, so then the mice, when they're just in the same environment, the mice that have obesity, do they lose weight, or do they just not become as large?
So in terms of weight loss versus weight gain, here we're talking about the phenotype that they exhibit is actually similar to the lean mouse phenotype.
Okay.
So you notice that the microbiome itself as well no longer exhibits that taxonomy that you see in the mice with obesity.
Okay, very interesting. Oh, okay. And so, I mean, is that the secret? Is that what we can do to treat and manage obesity? Just put people that have obesity put them all in, like it could be, well, they already have ridiculous reality shows around obesity and stuff, but I don't know what the big house or house whatever, head of household or whatever that show is, could we do something like that?
I mean, you would hope that as humans, we don't eat each other's poops like the mice do. So that wouldn't be possible from that side. But in terms of the fecal transplants, it is under investigation. And there was actually a recent study that I read where they did a fecal transplant in humans. It was an RCT. And they found that when they took the microbiome of healthy donors and transplanted them into those who have a dysbiosis in their microbiome, they noticed that they had improved insulin sensitivity. So that is one study. There's still a long ways to go when it comes to this particular therapeutic approach. So the evidence, of course, currently is inconclusive, and there's still a lot more to be done to have definite answers.
Okay, fair enough. So, I mean, if the listeners, if you want to hear more, definitely check out the two podcast episodes, and I'm sure we're going to have many more coming out on this topic. My final question is kind of the teaser that I always get on, and I'm a big proponent of this, but the sweeteners, are they causing issues with the microbiome? Do we need to be worried about them? What do we need to be thinking about in that respect of it?
I really hate to be that person who says we need more research. But when
No.
it comes to the sweeteners, there are some studies that came out where they looked at a particular sweetener and whether it affected the gut flora. And for example, that one study that comes to mind, they noticed that there wasn't really any harm that came from these sweeteners in relation to the microbiome. But what's to note there is that that is only one sweetener out of many. And even though it may not necessarily affect the bacteria in your gut, we really need to think about the microbiome as an intermediary outcome. And just because we don't see changes there, or we see changes there, may not necessarily translate into a disease state.
Okay. So a lot of complexity going on there. We don't maybe have all the answers. I'm still going to hold pretty fast on that until I see otherwise, but I appreciate the very scientific approach in that regard of it. And yeah, that's
Yeah,
awesome.
and things may change tomorrow night. Science is always evolving, and there may be a paper that comes out tomorrow that disproves everything we're talking about. So
It is possible. God knows what this COVID research has been impossible to try and keep up with. So um,
definitely.
lots of different things going on there. Well, thank you very much. Again, it was an absolute pleasure having you on the show. As to all the listeners, again, if you want to hear more, check us out at the Big Fat Facts podcast. The episode 1 is out. Episode 2 is going to come out another week or so here. Probably when the videos start really getting out there, it'll already be out there. So be sure to check it out. We dive into this topic in a lot more detail, and we got a few more episodes kind of loaded in the chamber, if you will, that we need to sit down and kind of go over. But yeah, any final words there?
It was a pleasure to speak with you on this topic, and I'm really excited about the next ones we have lined up, all 200 of them.
All 200. All right. Well, we got to spend a lot of time together. I like that. Excellent. Well, thank you very much there, Dr. Kebbe. Always a pleasure. And yeah, we'll see us on the podcast, and we will see you later.
All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Burden.